And hello, my name is James Rush. I am hosting this session that will be offering you some tidbits and information and a wide variety of ideas regarding art in the classroom. And so I will let William introduce himself fully so that you get the correct pronunciation on all things. And also I am very grateful welcoming William into this session. So please go ahead and begin.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that was probably a good save. My surname does trip people up sometimes. But my name is William Tiley, and I'm a lecturer at Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, APU, which is in southern Japan. And yeah, I'm here today talking about a kind of a study I've been working on. It's a bit of a pet project, really, dealing with modern art in the English classroom and how it can be kind of used to help students develop various key skills for language education. So I'm going to kind of take you through step by step on this sort of journey that I've been on with this project, from basically what inspired me to do it all the way through to what I've found out. So first of all, I'll talk about the background and the inspiration and motivation behind this study. Firstly, APU. APU is in Beppu in southern Japan, and it's an international university. So about half of our student body come from outside of Japan, representing 95 countries and regions. In fact, I think within that, a fairly large cohort come from South Korea. And within the university, language classes are compulsory, but they are not what the students end up majoring in. So students have to take classes in Japanese or English in addition to their major. The idea is that all students go through APU, and by the end of it, they will be capable of communicating at a high level in both English and Japanese. Within that, I've been teaching in an intermediate English A course, which focuses on speaking, listening, and writing, and is aimed at a kind of CEFA A2, B1 kind of level. So the transition from sort of daily conversation into some more academic topics. And the textbook we use for this, as you can see, is Contemporary Topics 1. I don't know if you guys have had any experience with this book in particular, but what sparked me onto this as a topic was Unit 5 in this textbook, which deals with modern art. And yeah, so the English classes you have 4 100-minute classes per week. And as part of these classes, I started including discussions based around modern art, paintings that I know about, and thought, we'll see what students think of this. And through that, it seemed that after the 2 weeks that it took to deliver the unit, students were generally more communicative and more willing to take risks. They were more willing to guess things about what was about the visual clues in front of them. And it seemed kind of interesting. So I thought I would dig into this and see if there's any kind of precedent for this. So firstly, regarding art in language education, there was quite a considerable amount of material on the cultural and social benefits of introducing art to the classroom. So through art, students can learn about cultural practices and become more aware of social justice in various countries, because art often reflects the immediate culture around the environment in which it's produced, right? There were also a couple of papers that talked about the theorized benefits of art education in language. So developing critical thinking and communication skills, fostering creativity and self-esteem, and just the overall possibilities for a meaningful learning experience. However, these papers didn't really provide any data on the subject. They were just kind of speculating about these potential benefits. More recently, there have been a couple of interview-based studies regarding the role of art in the classroom, and scholars have found that it helped increase motivation through content-based learning, and gave students opportunities to practice vocab and grammar skills in a slightly more expanded way than you would get when dealing with more regular class topics. But there was still nothing particularly that lent itself to showing this sort of confidence thing that I'd noticed. However, I then also looked into art in general education. So the role that art has played in educational institutions around the world, in America in particular. And there was a lot more material on this. And it seems that around the turn of the millennium, I guess when computing was really taking off as something that people can use in their daily lives, and therefore art became a kind of debatable topic. But there were a couple of large, like, compendia of papers, these two here, the Champions of Change and Critical Links. And they looked at data from a wide range of schools and found that art education had a load of additional benefits, giving students academic skills, encouraging creativity, originality, fluency, willingness to take risks, willingness to display learning, creating a collaborative, cohesive classroom atmosphere, all of these things which are very, very positive in a language classroom, and are often things that students find it difficult to overcome. Additional studies have, there hasn't been anything quite as extensive as these two huge compendia, but additional studies showing that it provides a safety net for experimentation, encourages problem-solving skills, expands student perceptions of the world, which I think ties it back to the other papers that talked about how it's good for raising awareness of cultural and social issues. So it seems like there's a body of work relating to art in general education, secondary schools, high schools, but not much in the field of foreign language education. There was one quote in particular that I really liked, and this is from John Dewey, who is held up as the godfather of the American education system. And he said that art should be a foundational part of the curriculum because it develops creativity, self-expression, and appreciation of the expression of others, which I think sums up everything that those papers had found quite nicely. And it's pretty clear that this is something that would be highly desirable in a language classroom too, right? So I decided to sort of distill this down into 3 research questions and conduct a study about this. So I focused on the learning experience. Does art education provide students with a meaningful learning experience? Can it kindle their interests and inspire them? Can it encourage self-confidence and willingness to express themselves in their second language? And finally, can art deepen connections between students in the second language classroom? So how did I carry out this study? Well, I should say up top that this was kind of designed to be a fairly simple study, keep it quite straightforward and condensed, because there was no existing material on this, and I didn't want to throw a load of time and effort into something that would potentially just not work. So the methodology I developed was fairly straightforward, but it also means it's highly repeatable. So I gave students a preliminary survey, then a crash course in art discussion. So this is doing the kind of art analysis 101 type thing, color analysis, like moods associated with colors, that kind of thing, and how you can apply that into approaching modern art. The other thing that it was important to stress was how everything in a work of art is a fairly deliberate decision on the part of the artist. They have chosen to show something in that way, and that has inherent meaning. So after this kind of crash course, we then discussed 2 works each day. It took about 20 minutes per class, so it worked quite nicely as a slightly extended warm-up. And I did give students basic discussion prompts just to kind of point them in the right direction, kind of get them thinking in like more productive ways, I guess. Then after 2 weeks, I gave them a post survey. And I repeated this the following semester. So I did this across 4 classes, which I think gave me a total of about 58 students all in. But here is an example of the prompts that I would give students. So this is Banksy's Mobile Lovers. I tend to use this one early on in the process because I think it's very accessible, but there's also a lot of interesting things you could say about it depending on what they're looking at, right? The meaning of this painting changes massively if they are, say, looking at work emails versus looking at like social media. And so you can see the questions I kind of used to gently nudge students towards this and get them to kind of read meaning out of the image. As well as this, I covered a range of different topics. I would often group paintings and theme them. So we looked at self-portraits from Van Gogh and Francis Bacon. We looked at surrealism from Salvador Dali and Frida Kahlo. I tied it in with things in the textbook as well. The textbook includes work from Picasso, Kandinsky, Chiraga. We looked at a bit of Impressionism and sculpture as well, just to kind of cover several different bases. And the survey itself, this was an identical before and after survey, with the exception of the first question that was asking if students had any experience studying art before. It then addressed 3 research areas covering students' interest in art. So if their interest in art increased, I think that would show this as a meaningful learning experience, right? Then self-expression and communication and connections between other students. There were 20 questions in total, and this was assessed on a 5-point Likert scale. So what did I find? Well, for research question 1, looking at students' interest in art and therefore its validity as a kind of meaningful learning experience, you can see from the table that generally students' interest in art increased over the course of the study. I compared the before and after results using a Wilcoxon's ranked interval test to give a kind of confidence interval that the before and after data sets are unique and definitive. And you can see that it came out at about 80% and 60% here. Working with Likert data, I should mention, you can see these changes are generally positive numbers, and that means that yes, interest did increase. However, due to the nature of Likert data, we can't use the size of this increase as a kind of a metric, because how could you assess the difference between, say, strongly agree and agree versus neutral and agree? While on a numerical scale, they would be the same, but for students, it would vary depending on the individual, right? So the size of this difference is not statistically significant. It's just the existence of the difference. And this is a limitation with Likert data. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. You can see that generally this was a positive experience for students, and their interest in art did grow over the course of the 2 weeks. Research question 2, this was dealing with confidence and self-expression. And again, I think you can see that the confidence, generally the intervals increased quite positively. And when using the statistical analysis, you can see that the confidence of this change is generally around 70 to 80%, even a nice little 94 thrown in there. So again, like some noticeable differences in student confidence and willingness to express themselves. Finally, research question 3 regarding kind of connections within the classroom. Now, of course, I haven't shown all the questions from the survey in this presentation just because space mostly. But regarding research question 3, you can see that the differences were not quite so significant. I think there's this one which was quite high. Students seem to be more interested in their classmates' opinions after the survey. However, not so much regarding other questions. The kind of confidence that the post-survey was statistically an improvement from the pre-survey is a little bit lower, and we can't talk about it quite so definitively. So what does this mean? Regarding the research questions, firstly, students seemed more interested in art after the study, which I think suggests that this is probably a meaningful learning experience. They developed their interests. Students seem to report higher levels of spoken confidence after the study. So again, research question 2, looking reasonably positive. However, for research question 3, it didn't indicate particularly significant changes in their communicative relationships with other students. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of you screaming at the screen right now saying, but Will, to be statistically significant, you have to be over 95%. What are you doing? And yes, from this data, none of the questions came out as a statistically insignificant change because we need 95%. However, I think if we flip that, really 70 to 80%, we can't say anything definitive, but this would probably be worth investigating further, right? And I think to get a 70 to 80% reading from a 2-week study regarding self-confidence and self-expression, I think is actually quite a good result. So I think this suggests that maybe some more should be done in this area. So I'll quickly gloss over some limitations because I do want to hear your ideas and feedback. The study was pretty small, so it would be worth expanding the scope of the study. More classes over a longer period of time. This was only done over 8 classes with 4 groups of students. A more robust methodology would also be helpful. This was designed as a kind of preliminary investigation. It was designed to be kind of flexible and easy to deliver, but with more focus on self-expression, then we could put a more established model for measuring self-expression, then we could potentially get some more useful data. There's also some issues with the Likert scales and data analysis. Students tend to be overly positive and they want to reflect themselves in a positive way. However, by having 2 surveys that were then directly compared, it should normalize out these issues, provided students are being equally positive about themselves in both surveys. There was also an issue with one class in particular, and practicalities of teaching hit us all. This one class were on the receiving end of a little bit of a telling off, shall we say, about 15 minutes before taking the post-survey, which was unfortunate. However, if anything, that would probably reduce their overall self-confidence. Yeah, it was an unfortunate thing, but teaching life sometimes requires this, right? So yeah, that's everything from me. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, I'd love to know if you have any questions, comments, or ideas. Please feel free to contact me as well. My email address is on the screen there. But yeah, thank you for taking time out of your busy mornings to come and hear me ramble about art and statistics, I guess. So yeah, if anyone has any questions or comments, please let me know.
Great. Thank you, Will. We do appreciate the approach that you've taken. And I don't normally put art and statistics together, so it's nice to see all those questions coming out and things. So for those of you that are here in attendance, we have about 5 minutes. Again, if the conversation kind of continues and there's a lot of interest, you're more than willing to keep the conversation going. But what are your thoughts, questions, ideas, comments? The floor is open to everyone here in the room.
I can go, I guess. Thank you very much, William. That was pretty nice. I love to, I really liked how you did with research with the students. I was wondering, I don't know, you mentioned earlier, the piece you pick for the students, is that, how did you decide those pieces going to students, or is it from student perspective?
So that the artwork that I gave to students. So as I mentioned, some of it was in the textbook, and so it kind of made sense to use that. But I also, I think it's something I am very interested in, so I kind of just based it on my own knowledge of stuff that would be kind of accessible, I guess. My mother is also an art teacher, so I consulted with her a little bit about particular works that might be more appropriate and easily for students to kind of digest. So yeah, it was kind of mostly from experience and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, next question. Have you thought about the art piece itself? Have you thought about asking your students to pick piece and explain into English?
So I think as within this, they did actually have a kind of a discussion about a piece of art that they had chosen, and they could then introduce to a group. So yeah, that was also kind of included in there. But I think for the purposes of this study, it was kind of easier just to go sort of straight down the line, give them material and prompt them to discuss.
The reason I was asking, I teach art as well, but it's a digital art. It's all related to technology. But then when I talk about discussion with the art piece, also fine art, you cannot avoid it. So sometimes I ask a student perspective, what was your favorite piece of you can explain? Sort of connecting your identity that they can describe. That was just my thought. But that was interesting how you can pick.
Yeah, I think that would be a very interesting addition. Yeah, I always find when students have to choose something themselves, there'll be a few who take the time and they go and find something they like and they research it. And then there's a lot of them who just get into the classroom, Google modern art, and then just pick something. So it kind of, you get a fair old range with it. So it can be a little bit unreliable. Yeah, there's some requests for references and things. If I share this, that might help you guys. And then I don't know if people want to like screen grab or something. And then I can move on to the slide about art in general education as well. If everybody's happy, I can move on in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so please feel free to screen grab and take pictures of anything you need.
I'd be curious as to, are there other texts and or websites and current art educator websites that you tend to follow that have helped to inform some of your practices, as well as any of the research that didn't make the presentation?
Yes. So, well, I mean, everything going well, I'm hoping to try and publish this in the conference proceedings, so that will give you kind of a more detailed approach. But one thing that was incredibly useful was regarding the kind of the teaching methodology behind it, was from an art educator called Nicola Giardina. And I think she is she's an author and art educator, and she developed this kind of pyramid system for encouraging discussion. And so when I gave students those prompts, it was kind of derived from this pyramid system of, it's kind of like first silent observation, describe what you see, talk about features within that, and then kind of start rationalizing and deriving meaning from it, rather than just immediately looking at a painting and going, well, this is clearly about such and such. So I'll put the link for her website in the chat as well, because it was kind of useful. She's also written a book, which I managed to get sections of, but yeah, I think that was a particularly key motivator in the more practical side of delivering this.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the questions, whatnot. We are now at the 25-minute cutoff officially, but the thank yous want to be offered. And for those of you who are watching this video, like, 1 or 2 months later, you'll just have to reach out to Will and find out what happened in this conversation after the recording stops. For those of you that are here, please thank you, and please give a round of applause. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of today. There is also going to be a continued conversation over in the Discord server. So again, thank you for your attendance, and take care from Korea TESOL International Conference 2022.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of